Hello, my name is Bohdan, and today I'm going to talk about requirements and how we can capture them in the product requirement documents. I think many of us have seen pictures like this, which you might think a bit exaggerated, but that's only if you didn't work for many years in software development. After working for many years, you find them pretty precise. So how do we avoid to have so different point of views? We can use requirements. So some might say that writing requirements is a big waste of time, right? Why? Because we have Agile, right? If we are Agile people, we do the small iterations, we work on what we have in hand, and we iterate, and we also apply this to requirements. Basically, we just do it as part of our sprint. The reality is there are numerous studies why this might not be the best idea. Some studies show how the quality of requirements directly affects the success of the project. Other studies study how basically the chain of effects from quality of planning and goal and plan changes affects the efficiency of the team and also the final satisfaction of the customer. So one of the studies said that the quality of planning can positively affect the both efficiency and client satisfaction, while goal changes and plan changes actually decrease it significantly. So now let's do some pretty straightforward approach. Like, what does it take to build an app? We just take an idea, we take some techno magic, and we have the app in the end, right? This is some kind of like helicopter view on how apps are built. If we try to rationalize the process and like add more details, we can say that actually we need some user stories, we need some UI, we need some code, then we will get an application. If we rationalize even further, we say that we need some server probably, because maybe this is client-server application. User expects his data to be propagated among devices. If we make it even more formal, we say actually we can capture the stories in the product requirements documents, and also we require the better quality of assets. And the latest level I can go to is that we add the client-server protocol to formalize the communication between client and server. So in scope of this talk, we will focus on the product requirements documents. So effectively, this is an evolution of an idea. So you want to build something, so you start to formalize this idea first into stories and then eventually in the product requirements documents. So the easiest way to describe them is PRD is a collection of tightly coupled user stories. So what goes into PRD? The goal, what you're trying to build. Also the user stories and UI for it. So it's screenshots of some raw UI works very well. Release plan, when do you want this feature or project to be built? Are there any difference between iOS, Android, and mobile web? What's important to track? Because sometimes it doesn't worth building a feature if you cannot even track it, how it performs. And also it goes if you have some additional resources like localized strings. Maybe most importantly, what doesn't go there? Technical solutions. You don't allow your architects to jump into the document and start putting diagrams and requests and responses and all these things. This has to be in the completely separate document, the protocol document, which is out of scope of this talk. Also the future plans. If you start to add the future plans, it starts to confuse people who try to build the thing, because they don't understand we are building version 1, but there is version 2 and version 3, so let's skip something, let's built version 1.5. And also discussions. It's not a place to have lengthy discussions what we're building. By this time, it should be clear what we're building. There should be only questions which specify more specifically what we're trying to achieve. So, example of user story, very simple, nothing formal, right? So very natural language, not crazy amount of details, but with screenshots of the UI, which helps to understand the user story much better. And if you talk about analytics, it can be pretty detailed. That depends again on the requirements of how it's important for the particular feature. What are the benefits of the PRD comparing to the user story? It's a permanent document. So when you finished describing what you're trying to build, it's staying there for everyone to come back and look into it. So it allows to share the knowledge in the company, mitigates the turnover. If people leave, they don't have to try to understand how features are supposed to work from the code, but they have a document describing this. And also, important part, it doesn't restrict you from the changes. It actually welcomes changes because it has a versioning system. It just has a process of handling them. Okay, you might say, nice, but we have JIRA Stories working for us, so why would we bother changing? JIRA Stories describe only one story, and it's pretty easy to lose the context of what is it related to. And it encourages communication maybe when it's like too late, rather than because it might not have huge amount of descriptions. You would have to go and chase some people and try to figure out, and all of it might be just for sake figuring out the story cannot be implemented, or maybe it's blocked. So it kind of also disappoints people that they started to build something, actually they can't build it. And also it encourages fire and forget mindset in the negative sense. You develop a feature and you deliver it and then it's gone. Finding it in JIRA is almost impossible. And some questions you can use to test if that's true for your team. Can any developer pick up any story on your JIRA, or you need some specific context to be able to work on it? Can you find it when it's completed? Can you ask your team to build your project from scratch if they only use JIRA Stories as reference? You say, well, still, we are at 100% capacity. We don't have ability to incorporate this. We're just very busy. And this is when I remind this picture. So let's do some kind of self-assessment. You can do this in your team using the tools you are using every day. For example, you can look at your cycle time. Don't pay attention to the actual numbers. The important part is the deviation. So it might look like this when the deviation is twice size of the rolling average. What does it mean? It means that sometimes it takes 1 day to complete a ticket, but sometimes it takes almost 4 weeks, like 2 sprints if you have 2-week sprints. Why it's important? If you cannot predict when the ticket will be delivered, when a small ticket will be delivered, so your estimations are highly different from feature to feature, then when business wants to build something more complex, it's basically like a time black hole for them. They can't really answer the simple question when the big project will be done. Another thing you can look into is your release cycle. if you release once or twice a month, basically you have only one opportunity a month to deliver new functionality or bug fixes to your customers. Others might be releasing multiple times a week and constantly delivering small bug fixes and mitigating all big risks, because the releases are short. There is very small space to deliver huge breaking changes. So how written requirements help us? They keep your options closed. Usually you want to keep your options open, but let's look into this more precisely. So let's say someone approaches you and says, hey, I want a tree. And you get your tree delivered, any of those. So it didn't work well for this customer. So he makes another attempt. He specifies more precisely what he wants to get built. And in the end, he gets actually what he wanted, what he had in his mind. Could be something different, but it still works for him because it matches his requirements. So who is going to write this? Ideally, your customer is writing requirements. So a perfect ratio is one product owner per squad. But if your customer doesn't write them, it's time to involve you. You say like, well, I don't have time for this. Let me explain. When you try to deliver a feature, you already do 90% of work. You already talk to all the stakeholders. Effectively, you interview them to understand what you're trying to build. You chase some teams to unblock yourself and to proceed. So at some point, you have the mental model clicking in your mind. Okay, this is a feature. This is what I'm building. And the only part which is missing is actually writing this down in the natural English language. Again, not adding any request responses, anything, just English language, what is it about. So effectively, you just go to the wiki, create new PRD, and profit. So where would you start? So Atlassian has very simple product requirements document template. Very minimal, it's like nice place to start. Also, they have a very good article about one-page PRD, goes step by step what can be there and how to approach building a PRD. Yeah, this is the truth of development. You really can't save any time by jumping on development. You really need to do the analysis stage. It doesn't really matter who is doing that, but it just helps when it's done. Thank you.